Have you ever seen someone build a driveway across your land without asking? When I was younger, I used to spend a lot of time at my friend's house. His dad, Mark, lived in a part of town where the land was so steep you couldn't just pour a straight driveway from the road up to the houses. The slopes were too sharp, so all the driveways had to snake up in switchbacks just to meet building codes. A few doors down from Mark lived an older couple, George and Helen. They were the kind of neighbors everyone loved, quiet, kind, and never in anyone's business. Next to them was a vacant lot that had sat empty for years. Then one day it sold, and a new owner started building a house. The problem started with his driveway. Instead of carving it entirely on his land, the guy cut the bottom section right across George and Helen's property. With an excavator, he tore through the hillside and left a scar that ran from the road, across their yard, and up toward his new home site. They didn't even realize what had happened until they came back one afternoon and saw the construction equipment sitting on the hillside. Being the decent people they were, George and Helen thought it had to be an honest mistake. They walked over to talk to the machine operator, but he said he was just following orders. He gave them the owner's number, so George called him directly. That call didn't go well. The new neighbor, who George had never even met before, flat out denied the driveway crossed into their property. He was rude and dismissive, insisting they were wrong. When George double-checked the property pins, there was no doubt the driveway was definitely on their land. But the more they tried to reason with the guy, the clearer it became he had no interest in fixing it. Now George and Helen weren't the type to jump into a legal fight. Lawsuits were expensive, stressful, and at the end of the day, the damage was already done. But they also couldn't let someone just walk all over them like that. So the situation dragged on while construction on the house continued. One day, George shared the story with Mark while they were chatting outside. Mark liked George and Helen a lot, and hearing what happened to them got under his skin. That evening, after a couple of beers, Mark came up with a plan. He called George and Helen, explained his idea, and asked for their blessing. They laughed and told him to go ahead. That night, Mark pulled his old rusty F-150 out of the driveway. He drove over to George and Helen's place and parked it right across the section of driveway that cut through their property. He made sure it was completely on their land, locked it up, and left a note with his phone number in the window. The next morning, the construction crew rolled up to start work, only to find their access completely blocked. They called the number on the note, and Mark answered. He told them straight up, the truck was parked with the owner's permission, and he wasn't moving it. If anyone touched the vehicle, they'd be facing trespassing and theft charges. The workers weren't about to haul their tools up the steep hill by hand, and they definitely didn't want to get stuck in the middle of a property dispute. So they called the new owner and told him they'd be taking the day off until the driveway issue was sorted. That set the new neighbor off. He called George and Helen, furious, demanding they make Mark move the truck, but they stood their ground. The truck was on their property, and they had every right to leave it there. If he had a problem with that, well, that was his problem. For a while, the neighbor raged and tried to bluff his way through, but in the end, he wanted his house finished, and with no access for the crew, nothing was going to happen. Eventually, he caved. George and Helen ended up negotiating a deal. The neighbor paid them a significant sum of money for an official easement, giving him the legal right to use that strip of land for his driveway. In the end, George and Helen got properly compensated. Mark got several cases of beer as a thank you, and the arrogant new neighbor learned a hard lesson about respect.